Hello friends, I am Shefali Ray and today I am your teacher, and today we are going to discuss speaking in the second language and speaking effectively. Well, teachers, you all know that for years teaching of language has always been considered teaching of the written language, which means the sentences are well formed, formal to a large extent except those personal letters, and then they are integrated into highly structured paragraphs. As a result, that happened in India too, till about 10-15 years back, and as a result people were very good at writing, but the skill of speaking, day-to-day interaction, using the second language or using English for real life purposes for orally was really not, that kind of a skill was not developed. And we feel that in learning any language, a learner needs to develop both the skills of speaking and writing, and of course with that comes listening. Without listening you can't speak, and reading for writing. Today we are going to address the issue of speaking effectively. Now first, let's look at the needs of the learner. Our learner who is learning, what does he or she need to do with the language? We know that whenever I am now talking to you, I am giving you information. Maybe if one of you brings up and asks me a question, you are asking a question. These are called language functions. What function the language is doing? So the learner needs to develop the skill of using appropriate language, that which means grammar and vocabulary, pronunciation, stress, intonation, and other social conventional phrases, etc., in order to speak, in order to perform that language function. So let us first look at the needs of the learners. The first is greeting friends, superiors and strangers, and for all the three it would differ, the language would slightly differ. Then comes introducing self and others in various situations, both formal and informal, making telephone calls or answering them. And we all know that everyone has a telephone, and if you for official purposes, academic purposes, or even for friends when you're talking in English, you need to answer telephone calls in English. Then asking for or giving information. Well, you can ask for information on in real life, outside, in the shop, asking for directions, asking where a place is, or in the classroom when you're asking for information. Asking for things in shops, counters and restaurants, where you have to order food, you've asked what is available, how much the price is, etc. Expressing opinion or reactions. As learners grow up, they are mature, independent thinkers, and they do have a concept of their own, they have an opinion of their own, so they need to express opinion or reactions to programs, to plays, to books, films, or events. And as they grow up, they need to participate in discussions, debates. Then they need to give or receive instructions. Processes are discussed and they need to discuss that. They need to receive instruction or give instructions. Then they need to describe things or places. They should know, what do we talk about, what do they talk about, introduce it, name it, what is it made of, or the place, where it is situated, what is it used for, depending upon what they're describing, or describing a person. And then of course in real life there's a lot of narration, narrating what happened yesterday, what interesting thing happened in the office, narrating anecdotes, stories, and also discussing them, whether it was right on somebody's part to do something, basically looking at it objectively. And then, well, if you're learning a language, you need to use it. And then what better thing is to use it in conversation with your friend, so that to carry on a conversation, a sustained conversation. Now what does sustain mean? Sustain means a conversation of some length, not only an interchange or an exchange which gets over with 4 utterances. No, it's a long thing where you're discussing things, sharing things, giving your reactions to whatever the other person is saying, agreeing, disagreeing. So a sustained conversation with friends, family, strangers, maybe even teacher. When they're discussing their projects, discussing their assignments, they might have to do that. And of course, very important, the need to report an event. These are some of the language functions that we have looked at, that a learner needs to know or how to perform using appropriate vocabulary, grammar, language, social formula, expressions, conventional phrases, intonation, of course pronunciation, intonation, and stress. Now, we're going to look at the difference between spoken language and written language. Now, we know that spoken language is very informal, except when you're giving a speech, making a speech in a convention hall, like the people on a great occasion or a serious occasion, you're making a speech. It is formal, but largely speaking is informal. Conversation, telling a story, listening to something, giving your comment, that is informal. Which means it also is, the grammar is slightly loose. We make repetitions, there's a lot of overlap, and the language is not very structured. In contrast, the written language that we write, we need to be very careful about the written language. We need to have well-formed sentences in structure, in grammar, and there is some amount of formality in writing, except when we are writing little notes, when we take telephone calls and write notes for others, of family members, or we write letters to personal letters to members of the family. Writing is largely a serious affair. It is a formal affair. So we are going to now look at some differences between speaking and writing. Yes, differences between spoken and written language. So the first thing we talked about was speaking is face-to-face interaction, whereas in writing the writer does not see the face of the reader, and we do not know when the reader will read it. It is not very determined. 2. Speaking is spontaneous and it happens in real time. I need to hear it, I need to respond immediately. Whereas in writing, my language is more planned. Maybe I can think over it. Oh no, I need to change that expression. I read it again, I make notes, and I edit it. So basically, it is redrafted, it is more planned, it's more structured. More care is taken into the written piece. And of course, as we said, speaking is processed in real time. And actually, writing, we say speaking is primary to language, which means language we need to use orally. Writing comes in when we need to record what we are saying, when we need to use it in the later point of time. And we see here the writing is permanent. It is published and it can be read anytime because it is there. It doesn't disappear. It is not transient like spoken language, and then it can be transmitted across space and time. Let's look at some more differences. Well, we have already discussed speaking is less structured. Let us see how it is less structured. Well, the utterances may not be complete sentences. I may say, not really. So what? These are perfect utterances conveying perfect meaning, but they are not complete. And whereas in writing, we need to be syntactically correct. The sentence has to have a subject, object, and the complete structure needs to be there. And then speaking depends upon many more things than writing. Of course, speaking depends upon my intonation, stress. When I say, oh, this is a good book, I'm putting a stress on this. This is a good book. This is a good book. There's a difference. Is a good book, I'm trying to confirm. I'm going to say, no, don't say that it's not. It is. But when I say this is a good book, when I'm putting a stress on this, it means what? Not that. This one is a good book. So it depends upon, there's so many other things that come into play. It is stress, then intonation, the pattern. Now suppose I say, this is EMPC, this is where I'm sitting now and we are recording this. So this is EMPC, this is EMPC. Grammatically, syntactically, it's like an assertive sentence. But what happens when I say it with a rising intonation? It changes and turns into a question. Stress, intonation, facial expression, body language, positioning, volume of my speech, my modulation. There's some things I might say loudly. There's some things I may say in a hushed whisper. Then there is speed of delivery. Normally you must have noticed when we get angry, we deliver things very fast. So when we want to say things very quickly, we deliver it very fast. Or if we are unhappy about something, sometimes we are very deliberate and we chew each word before we speak. So there is a difference between speaking and writing. And what our learners need to develop are the skills of speaking. So we are now going to look at some of the purposes of spoken language. Yes, oral communication, that is speaking. There are two basic functions of that. When I speak, I either want to inform, explain, describe, or I want to carry on a conversation over telephone, when I meet face to face, in order to establish or maintain a social relationship. So the first one is called transactional, and this is what we use very much in academic life. Transactional. The second one is interactional, when I'm talking. Let's look at that now. Types of oral communication. Let's look at the slide. Yes. Now, first is transactional, and what the teachers do, what you teachers do in the class, you give information, and sometimes you have to give a lot of information. And transactional giving of information also means one has to speak at length on a topic. But then transactional is also a part of our interaction. If I ask somebody some information, then the person explains it to me. That is also transactional. And of course, interactional is for maintaining social relationships. And friends, the native speaker, the speakers of English who are born in England or America, wherever they speak English, they're very good in interaction. Everyone is, because they're all using it for real life. But the transactional skill, to be able to speak, to give information at length, needs some amount of training. It needs some amount of skill. Maybe what I'm doing is transactional, and I did have to practice, and there's all years of training that goes into it. I must know what is my topic, how much I must talk about this topic, to what length can I go, what would be the structure of my sentences that I speak. If I'm addressing the lay persons, I should not use any kind of technical terms. If I'm talking to younger people, then I must use simpler language, shorter sentences. And then do I repeat? Which are the points that I need to repeat? I need to know that. And How do I introduce my topic? How do I present my major details, major points, and what details do I include? How do I sum it up? This is a highly skilled thing, and so our students also need a bit of transactional use of language. But today we are going to concentrate more on the interactional use of language, because if you are preparing them for real life, and everyone is not going to be an academician, everyone is not, people generally need it for use in day-to-day life. So we're going to address the interactional part of speaking. I'm sorry. Now, there are other two basic distinctions. One is the use of language as a monologue, again what we do, what I'm doing possibly, and dialogue. In monologue it is difficult because I need to retain attention. I need to make sure my listeners are listening to me and their attention doesn't flag. In a dialogue, it's a two-way process. So two people are responsible. And the dialogue or the conversation goes on if both are interested. Both want to carry it forward. And there are three things a speaker needs to keep in mind. One, why am I speaking? Am I going to request? Am I complaining? Am I introducing? Am I describing? Am I telling a story? Am I giving instructions? That is one, the purpose. Number two, who I am speaking to or speaking with. A senior, a junior, we have designation, a person elder to me, younger to me, a stranger, a friend with whom I can be intimate and take advantage and be very, very informal. So the formality comes in with the audience as well. Who am I talking to? And the third thing I need to keep in mind when I am speaking is the situation, is the setting. Where am I speaking? Maybe the speaker and listener being the same, their interaction will be different at home and in an office, or on the street and in a boardroom, because it is a setting. How formal is a setting, how informal is a setting, that also decides what kind of language we are going to use. That is how we need to be very careful about where we are, who we are speaking to, and why we are speaking. Right? Okay, now let's look at the next slide, and we say, find out that the interactional function. We have talked about interaction, and that it is to maintain social relationships. Day to day, you need going at the shop, asking for things, asking for directions, talking with your friend over the telephone, whatever. Let's look at some of the interactional function of language. What do we need in order to interact effectively in the language? We need correct sounds, which means I need to use the correct pronunciation. I need to use the sounds of English correctly. There are certain sounds in the English language which do not exist in my language, but I need to learn the sound and use them correctly. Like O. O. That O sound doesn't exist in Hindi. It is either O or Au. So I would not say hout, or I will say hot. I would say O, hot. Then use of correct pronunciation, then use of correct structures. Structures, of course, you all know grammar, the grammatical structures. I need to know grammar. We know that in Hindi, the syntax is loose. I can shift around the words and my meaning may not change. मैं कल वहाँ गया था, कल मैं वहाँ गया था मैं कल वहाँ. More or less the meaning is the same, but that doesn't happen with English. I went there yesterday. Yesterday I went there is good, but went I yesterday, when go there, doesn't make sense. So I need to be careful about the syntax, the grammar. Then I need to know the acceptable degree of fluency. That means I need to be able to speak fluently, without stopping, without stuttering, without stammering, without saying waiting, giving myself time to think, though it is acceptable, but not too much of it. Which means I should have vocabulary, I should have grammar. And then what I need is both, we have talked about, we need both transactional and interactional skills. When I have to give information, that this transactional. And I need to also know how to take turns when we are speaking. Both of us cannot speak at the same time. When I'm asked a question, okay, how was the lecture? Tell me something about it. Then I need to, this is a longer turn. I can't finish it up. It was all right. I can't do that. When she said, tell me something about it, then I need to go into a little more of detail. So it's a longer turn. So I must know when to take a long turn and when to take a short turn for speaking. The next one is managing interaction. I should know how to manage interaction. What do we mean by managing interaction? Well, I need to know when I need to speak up, to take the floor, to say, no, I don't agree with you. I think this should be like this. No, I have a suggestion. I can say, I'm taking the floor, I'm taking the lead. When do I and how do I ask another person to speak? What do you think about it, Rajni? What's your opinion about it? How about you? There are various ways I can ask a person to speak. Then taking turns while speaking. How do I initiate a conversation? How do I sustain it? We are going to see by and by how to sustain a conversation also. And then managing conversation, I also need to see if my listener is interested in what I'm saying. If not, I need to change the topic. I need to know who is my listener. To what extent can I go? How much do I tell the person? How much do I talk about the topic? And finally, how do I wind down the conversation and close the conversation? So let's quickly run through the interaction functions. Interaction functions: 1. Use of correct sound. 2. Use of correct structures, which is grammar. Sounds would mean pronunciation, and I would like to mention here, we also would like to talk about intonation and stress. Acceptable degree of fluency, without stopping, without pausing very long, without repeating, without stuttering, stammering. Transactional and interpersonal skills. Interpersonal, because I know what is my relationship with the other person and how I need to speak. Because how I speak, my tone tells my attitude and my mood. So I have to be careful. Taking short and long speaking turns. Again, am I expected to speak long or short? Or for next one, management of interaction. Now look at the next one. It says negotiating meaning. We know how to negotiate on the crowded roads when we weave in and out. How do you negotiate meaning? Negotiate meaning is, it happens two ways. One, how do I understand, or have I understood what the speaker is saying when I'm a listener? How do I make the other person understand what exactly I mean? Now one can negotiate meaning by making sure that I understand before I respond, because my response will depend upon that. I can do that by asking questions. I can negotiate meaning by asking a person to repeat. Excuse me, could you repeat that, please? Could you say that a bit more slowly, please? Could you tell me what does it mean in Tamil, please? So I can ask a person for the meaning, for the translation. So I'm negotiating meaning. Or I can ask a person to repeat. I can also say, do you mean to say that? I'm confirming whether I've understood correctly or not. Then what else? I need to have a lot of listening skills. I cannot be a good speaker unless I listen. because I'm listening to what my speaker is saying, and accordingly I have to carry the conversation forward. I have to ask appropriate questions. I have to give appropriate remarks. I have to make appropriate encouraging noises. We are going to do that. We are going to look at the conversation ourselves, and I must know Hindi. You know that in Hindi, in Bangla, in different languages, Tamil, there are some stock sentences. The stock sentences are used for different purposes. In English, for example, oh wow, that's great. That's great means, oh, that's a wonderful news. If I say, would you mind shifting to the next seat, please? This is a stock sentence, like kind of an expression used in a very polite request. Hello, how are you? Again, it's a stock sentence. How are you doing? Well, in America, people say, hi, how are you doing? That's a stock sentence. When people first meet or they look at each other, that's what they say. And mind you, it's more or less a rhetorical question. Many a time people say good, many a time people don't even answer. So I need to know what we say, the conventional phrases in that language. And when I was talking of, say, encouraging my speaker, encouraging or making encouraging noises, we all do. In Hindi we say, Acha, aisa hua kya? In Kannada they say, Hauda? Sari? Sari means absolutely what we say in English. So there is, in every language, there is some standard conventional words, phrases, sounds which are used in conversation. Now, when I make a conversation, I need to know three things. I need to be able to, one, what did we say just now? Initiate conversation. To begin a conversation. Two, I need to maintain the conversation. It's not that, oh, how are you? I'm fine. But no, I want this to go forward. I want to have a little more chat. Three, how to close the conversation. Now, these are the three things. Let's look at them again. Conversational skills, initiating a conversation, maintaining a conversation, closing a conversation. These are the three things I need to do. Let's look at a short exchange and let us see how the person is initiating conversation. Well, let's look at the slide. I'm going to change it now. Yes, initiating. And of course, I'm going to play the roles because I'm alone here. I'm going to play the roles of both Shefali, that's me, and Anju. Well, let's look at the slide, please. Because as I speak, then you can read it along with me. Anju meets Shefali and Anju says, hello Shefali, how are you? I say, not too bad. How are you? Fine. And then I say, and how's your mother? Anju says, oh, she's very well, thanks. And the third person comes along. Oh, look, there's Deepak. Hey, Deepak, hi, how are things? Fine, thanks. Then Deepak notices me and says, oh, hello Shefali, haven't seen you for ages. Are you busy at work? I say, oh yes, it's our appraisal week. You know, the appraisal week where your work is being appraised and you're giving it a report. And Deepak says, oh, I understand. Now let's look at this conversation again. See, hello Shefali, how are you? What is it? Anju is initiating conversation. She is telling me she wants to talk to me and she's trying to get my attention by saying hello. And so hello Shefali, how are you? Initiating. What am I doing? I am responding. What am I saying? Not too bad. How are you? After responding, I am also initiating by asking a question. What do I say? How are you? And she says fine. She responds to my question now. And then I ask her another question. And how's your mother? Because she said she's fine. How's your mother? Anju responds. She says she's very well, thanks. And then we find somebody else whom we know he comes along. And Anju directs our attention to Deepak. And she says, oh, look, there's Deepak. Now she's initiating a conversation with whom? With Deepak. Deepak, hi, how are things? Now Deepak responds, oh fine, thanks. Then Deepak looks at me and Deepak now initiates conversation with me and he said, oh hello Shefali, haven't seen you for ages, means a long time. Are you busy at work? Are you busy at work? Look at the rising intonation. It's a question. Yes or no question. Are you busy at work? I say, oh yes. It's a appraisal week. And what does Deepak say? I understand. That is the encouraging noise. I understand. You was very busy, so you couldn't come. So this was a small exchange. Now, friends, if you notice, what Anju said first is we call it initiate. What I answer, we call it respond. What I ask again is called initiate, and Anju says, fine, it is respond. Okay, let's come down. Deepak says, haven't seen you for, are you busy at work? Again, initiate. We're constantly initiating, responding, and then I say, oh yes, I respond, oh yes, it's a appraisal week. And he says, I understand. Oh, I understand. This is not only encouraging noise, this is called follow-up. Like a few sentences we see, like, oh great, wow, wonderful, must be great. We say that as if, to close that little bit of exchange, give it a smooth change. Right. Now, let's look at what happens when we initiate. What do? We make greetings. We say hi, hello, greet. We make introductions. If we are strangers, then I say, excuse me, or I say, hello, I'm Shefali, I'm from India. So the other person will tell me. So I greet, we have introductions, and then I might even acknowledge somebody's presence. I just say, oh, hello Anju, oh, there you are, I wanted to discuss something with you. Acknowledging somebody's presence. So there are different ways of initiating conversation. Now let's go on and let's look at another conversation. Okay, there's one thing I left out, is attention getting. Attention getting is what we normally do. Excuse me, can I have the time please? Excuse me, where is EMPC? Excuse me is the attention getting, because you want the other person to pay attention to you, to listen to you, turn around and say yes, and then you ask. Now we'll look at another conversation. Now this is maintaining. We have done this. Now maintaining a conversation. Now this is a conversation between two people, Kishore and Ramesh. You can read it as I say play the roles of Kishore and Ramesh. Kishore, Ramesh, how nice to hear you. This is a telephonic talk, and so Ramesh has called up. How nice to hear you, because it's over telephone now. Have you had a good holiday? Ramesh said, oh great. I went away actually. Oh, Kishore said, oh did you? Where? Ramesh says, Bihar. How nice. Ramesh, we went to see my father. Kishore says, really? Where do they live? Ramesh, oh, near Ranchi, in a small village. Now let's look at the initiate, respond, follow up pattern. Let us look at this here. Now, what do you think this one is? Ramesh, how nice to hear you. Have you had a good holiday? What do you think this is? Initiate, no? He's asking a question, initiating, because he's seeking information. Then, what does he say? Ramesh says, great, I went away actually. He says, I had a great holiday, I went away actually. So he's giving a little more information. He says, oh, but where? So he says, oh, you went away, you went for a holiday, you went away, where? Where is again initiate. Now, Kishore is again initiating and asking, Ramesh, where did you go? Where? Instead of asking, where did you go, what does he ask? Simply one word, where. Do you notice that? That is why we said it is loose, syntactically loose. We don't always use complete sentences. And Ramesh just says one word, Bihar. And that is good enough, because that is the main point. That's the one with one word that carries the meaning. And Kishore says, oh, how nice. What do you think this is? This is follow up. You're following up, nicely tying up an exchange, a smooth tying up. But then Ramesh goes ahead to give little more information, and he says, we went to see my father. Kishore says, oh really? Really, it's not that he's surprised or anything. It's again a kind of an encouraging noise. Where do they live? Ramesh responds, near Ranchi in a small village. Now we look at what all do we need to do in order to maintain a conversation. We ask questions. See, Ramesh was asking questions Kishore was asking questions where do they live? So those are asking questions. You may even ask questions in order to, to make sure you understand. What do you mean by that? How exactly did you say that? Where exactly did you say? Like, how long did you say? What name did you say? These are questions we ask in order to carry on the conversation. Next, I do it by responding. By answering the questions or giving a counter remark to another remark. Somebody says, oh, it was a terrible day yesterday. It rained and rained and rained. Now I say, it certainly was. It certainly was. I couldn't do a thing. I'm agreeing with the person. So by agreeing or disagreeing, I am carrying on the conversation. I give information. Like, Ramesh was not asked, but he gave further information about his parents. So I give information because I want some more time with this friend of mine with whom I'm talking. And we explain. We explain by, I mean to say, it's like this. We explain what we said when we find that the listener is not exactly, has a slight uncomprehending look kind of thing on the face. We do a bit of explaining in order to carry on, maintain a conversation. And we make encouraging noises like I just said, oh great, wow, that's wonderful. How sad. If somebody says, oh, I was unwell the whole week, so how sad. Now let's look at another conversation. This is closing. Now Anju and I have been talking for some time. Anju looks at her watch and she said, oops, it's almost 11. I really must go. And I say, are you sure? What does it mean? Are you sure means, are you sure that you have to go? Does it really mean that? No. What do I mean? Oh, I wish to talk to you for a little while. Can't you stay back? But Anju says, no, I have a meeting. I have a meeting at IGNOU. Then I say, oh, well, it has been nice talking to you. Keep in touch. Now Anju apologizes because she has to go away. She has to stop the conversation midway, go away. She says, oh, I sure will. Sorry to rush off like this. Bye. I say bye. Now look at this closing. We must know how to close a conversation nicely, not abruptly. So this is a nice, because I need to go away. I look at my watch. I cannot talk anymore. Now I need to inform my listener, the other person with whom I'm talking, that we need to put an end to our conversation. So Anju says, oops, it's almost 11. She's already started giving me a hint that, okay, we can't talk anymore. And then she says, I really must go, because she's very polite. And I ask, are you sure? Now this in speaking is again another thing, because in speaking, often we say sentences which do not exactly mean the dictionary meaning or what they would mean. Are you sure in this context actually means, oh, Anju, I wish I could talk to you a little more. Can't you stay back? But she says, no, I have a meeting at IGNOU. Then I say, oh, well, it was nice talking to you. Keep in touch. And then she apologizes. Oh, I'm sorry to rush off like this. Bye. And then I say bye. Let's look at this again. So what is this? This is, now, we announce departure by saying, I really must go now. Oh, I need to go. Oh, there's somebody at the door. Something like that. Over telephone also we do that. We announce departure. It's good to announce departure. Announce the end of the conversation. And we give a reason. It's very polite to give a reason, and a plausible reason. Sometimes we even cook up a reason. When somebody is very boring, we don't say, you are boring, I don't want to talk to you. We say, oh, I need to go. Basically, I don't want to say you're boring, but I want to put it into the conversation. So sometimes I do need to give a reason. And then we need to thank sometimes. It depends upon, the situation. I can need to thank, oh, thank you for being in touch. Thank you for such a lovely evening. Oh, it was great talking to you. Thanking. Apologies. Oh, I'm sorry to rush off like that. I'm sorry I can't spend any more time with you. And finally, you are departing. You say goodbye. You say see you. You say I'll be in touch. You can say see you later. There are various ways of closing a conversation. Right? Now that we know how to carry on a conversation, how to close a conversation, we also remember here that conversation is not all about speaking. It is 50% about listening effectively and 50% about speaking effectively. If I did not listen carefully, if I were not paying attention, I would not make the right responses. And if I won't make the right responses, my speaker would be, or the other person would be unhappy. And the conversation might end abruptly or may not take the turn, a very pleasant turn. So I need to be a good listener in order to respond intelligently. And also sometimes I need to give an opinion. I might disagree totally. So if I don't listen carefully. Now there are two ways of listening. One, I listen to the words and the phrases that are coming to me and I try to interpret. This happens when I'm a beginner, just learning the language. I'm trying to get the vocabulary, the grammar, trying to see. The next way is what we call a top-down listening. A top-down listening is I notice where am I speaking, what is the topic, and I can already make a lot of guesses. So I can guess what this actually means. And then I close the conversation nicely. It ends smoothly. We also learned in an exchange, saying goodbye, we also learned in an exchange that there is initiate, respond, and follow on. Now let us look at what else that speaking entails, conversation entails. Let's look at the slide. The other things that matter in effective speaking. Well, first is clarity of voice. Shouldn't mumble. I shouldn't be talking. Some people, they say, oh, all along the gentleman was sitting and talking to his paper or talking to his hands. What does that mean? That means he was sitting and mumbling. Then speak with clarity so that the other person can hear you. Use voice modulation according to the topic, situation. Maybe whisper, maybe quickly, maybe slow, depending upon what is the context, what you are saying, your facial expression, your eyes. You make eye contact with the listener. Your eyes. The position of your head. The tilt of the head. Now when I sit like this, which means, oh, I am all ears. I am very interested in what you are saying. If I look like this, it means, come on, you have to speak. I'm sorry, I'm the punishment to listen to you, so I'm listening to you. I'm bored. So body language give away our attitudes, our moods. And so we have to be careful about our body language also. And then it's positioning. Where am I? When I want to talk to somebody, it's a good idea to go in front of the person and speak from front. And last, the speed of delivery. Neither too fast nor too slow. And something for you to read before we sign off. Something to remember. So we need to know that you need to be a good listener, and often things are meant but not openly said. That is the beauty of civil conversation. Thank you and goodbye. I must rush off now.